Welcome to another episode of Legendiary. On this episode, we sat down with Rich Roll, also known as Ultraman. Rich is a 52-year-old vegan ultra-endurance athlete, a full-time wellness and plant-based nutrition advocate, author, public speaker, husband, and a father of 4. His story serves as an inspiration worldwide and a testament of living a proactive life. Join me as Rich Roll shares his narrative to inspire. So Rich Roll, the Ultraman. Who is Rich Roll?
Oh wow, you're coming out of the gate hot.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Who is Rich Roll? Isn't that the ultimate question? Who are you?
Yeah.
You know, I'll probably go to my grave trying to answer that question. Most of all, I'm a father and a husband, but I'm an ultra endurance athlete. I'm a plant-based advocate and athlete. I'm an author. I'm a podcast host. I'm a public speaker. But ultimately, if you ask me, like, who am I? Like, who is Rich Roll?
Yeah.
That's really the question that I've devoted my life to trying to answer. You know, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and every day trying to live and do a little bit better.
That's amazing. I read your book, Finding Ultra. And to those who don't know your story, why don't you walk us back a little bit to how Ultraman came to be alive?
I grew up in Washington, D.C., an awkward, shy, kind of insecure kid. One of those kids that kind of walked around feeling like everybody else had the rule book for life except for me. And I was very kind of isolated. I had difficulty making friends. And then I discovered the sport of swimming at a relatively young age. It was the first thing that I actually had some adroitness with, that I had some natural ability and talent in. And I kind of threw myself into that sport. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was one of the top swimmers in my area, Washington, D.C., where I grew up, got recruited at colleges, and my life was looking pretty good. I ended up getting into every college I applied to. I went to Stanford in the fall of 1985, and was somebody who had a lot of promise in their life. And there was a lot of people invested in me actualizing that potential. And shortly after I arrived at Stanford, I discovered something I enjoyed more than swimming, which was partying and alcohol. And I would say at first, it worked. It brought me out of my shell. It allowed me to figure out how to be a social animal. For the first time in my life, I felt comfortable in my own skin. I could like go to parties and talk to girls, and I loved it, you know, and I think it really helped me at that time in my life. But as any alcoholic will tell you, it works until it doesn't. And it didn't take very long until alcohol and drugs started to really denigrate the quality of my life, to the point where all of those aspirations that I held for myself became secondary or unimportant, taking a backseat to where's my next good time. And so after my freshman year in college, I never really swam fast again, even though I was on this incredible swim team at Stanford. We won NC2As 2 years in a row, and I was swimming with my heroes, you know, Olympic gold medalists and world record holders. But honestly, like, I lost my love for it and just sort of went headfirst into trying to, you know, develop this inner party animal that I had. And it didn't happen overnight, but you know, it wasn't long before I realized that I was an alcoholic, and I continued my career as a professional alcoholic for many years, probably a decade. I lived in New York City, where things really ticked up a notch. Went to law school in upstate New York, then was a lawyer in San Francisco, and then down here in Los Angeles. And everything really came to a head when I was 31, where I got 2 DUIs in a row within months of each other. With ridiculously high blood alcohol content levels. I rear-ended an elderly woman and injured her. So my whole world just kind of fell on top of me. And that was compounded by an engagement and a wedding that went awry. That's a 2-hour saga I won't bore you with. But all of that brought me to my knees. So by the time I was 31, I realized like I needed to do something about my life. At the very end of my drinking career, I was somebody who was sleeping on a bare mattress on the floor of a crappy apartment. I was unemployable. I was alienated from my friends and my family. Really very much alone. It was not a romantic picture of life. I was not a vision for you. And finally, I got to that point where I was ready to raise my hand and ask for help. And I ended up in a rehab in Oregon, where I lived for 100 days, which is a long time to be in a treatment center. And that was really my first introduction to a new set of principles and tools to guide my life. It saved my life, and it set me on a brand new trajectory. And in the wake of that experience, my life became predominantly about recovery. When I got out of treatment, I was just focused on trying to build the strongest foundation for sobriety that I possibly could. Meanwhile, I was practicing law. I was very unhappy in that regard, but determined to rebuild this life that, I had a vision for as a young person, that person who had held so much promise. And so I kind of threw myself into that and became a workaholic and transferred a lot of those addictive tendencies that I have into my career. And so by the time I was 39, I had been successful in that regard. I had repaired my life and my relationships. I was on the partnership track at a very prestigious Los Angeles law firm. I had met my wife. We were building a family. We built this home. And so from the outside looking in, it looked like I had a pretty great life. Like I had all this stuff. I had all the trappings of the American dream. Successful professional career as a corporate attorney, Porsche in the driveway, and family, and all the good stuff, right? But I started to realize that none of these things, I love my wife and my kids, but what I was seeking for myself professionally was not making me happy. I was sort of had this percolating existential crisis about what I was doing with my life, because my whole life had been set up to kind of do what you're supposed to do. If you're a person of means and education, what do? You become a lawyer, an investment banker, a doctor, one of these things, right? And I was very good at figuring out the system and excelling in that regard without ever once stopping to ponder or consider, hey, what is unique to me? What makes me happy? What do I want to express in this short life? I was just on the program, climbing the ladder. My friend Rob Bell says, you can spend your whole life climbing the ladder only to realize that the ladder is leaning up against the wrong wall, and that's what I was doing. So shortly before I turned 40, this existential crisis was really percolating to the surface, and that really ran into a health crisis that I was having, because during this workaholism period, this decade of trying to rebuild my life, I had not taken care of myself physically. I'd become a junk food addict, basically eating at McDonald's and Jack in the Box and takeout food in the law firm. So I'd gained 50 pounds. I was depressed. I was unenthusiastic about my life, a classic couch potato, kind of sliding into middle age on a crash course with lifestyle disease. So I was never morbidly obese or anything like that. I just looked like a guy who probably works in a law firm too much. And so before I turned 40, these two things, this existential crisis and this poor health situation that I was in, kind of butted up against each other. When I worked late one night and I came home, my family was asleep, and I was making my way up to my bedroom, walking up this flight of stairs behind you, when I had to pause halfway up the flight of stairs. I was winded, I was out of breath, I had tightness in my chest, I was sweat on my brow, and really fear in my heart. I thought I was on the verge of having a heart attack. And heart disease runs in my family. My grandfather had been a champion swimmer, and he died very young of heart disease. So my mother would always say, you got to watch out for your heart, you got to take care of yourself. And when you're young, you're like, yeah. And it all became very real to me in that moment. And it was very similar to that day that I decided I'm going to get sober, a very definitive, precise moment in time in which I had this overwhelming sense of willingness to actually make a change. Mm-hmm. And because I had achieved sobriety, I knew the power of these moments. I knew if I could seize this feeling that I have, if I could bottle this moment and use that as a way to shift my trajectory, to translate it into some specific tangible actions that I could take, that I had another shot at reinventing myself once again. And that's what I did. I set about really reimagining and repairing my relationship with food first and foremost. And that's what got me interested in a plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that. And then ultimately, in the wake of repairing myself physically through diet and nutrition, got interested in athletics once again, which is something I hadn't done since I had been a swimmer in college. And I think, to answer your question, I'm finally circling back on the question that you asked me, what brought you to Ultraman? In a very short period of time after this sort of staircase episode, this epiphany that I had, I was able to change everything about how I was living. My relationship with food was different. I lost the 50 pounds. I felt vital and happy for the first time, and as long as I could remember. My depression had faded, and I was enthusiastic about life and the possibilities that it held. And that got me interested in human potential, specifically my own potential, because if I could make such a small change that had such a significant impact in my life in a very compressed period of time, what other areas of my life am I overlooking? What am I blind to right now? What kind of, what is the potential that I'm sitting on top of right now that I'm unaware of? And that's what got me interested and magnetized by ultra endurance sports, because in many ways, it's a beautiful, amazing template to test the outer limits of not just your physical abilities, but your mental, emotional, and spiritual abilities as well.
So being an entertainment lawyer, successful, having your career set, your family's doing well, everything's going great except for your health at the time. What was it like to leave a job like this and, financial security and all that?
Yeah, it was scary, but I think to really honestly answer your question, it's a much more complicated, nuanced thing than just walking away from a big salary. If you Google me, and it's sort of that's what the story kind of looks like, or that's the way people kind of portray what happened. But in actuality, I had been at a big law firm, and I realized after I had, a year and a half or so of sobriety, like I can't keep doing this anymore. And I ended up resigning from that law firm without any job. I didn't know what I was going to do. No plan whatsoever. I remember telling my boss at the time, like, I don't feel right about getting paid to do this job anymore because I'm so burned out. I just can't do it. You're not getting any value out of me. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going across the street for more money. I don't know if I'll ever be a lawyer again, but I just know like I can't keep showing up here. And I walked out of that zero plan. Like I had no idea what I was going to do. And that definitely was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, with the possible exception of going to rehab. So yeah, that was very disorienting, but I just knew that it was what I had to do for myself. And I trusted that I would somehow be guided to the next thing. And what happened was, within a couple weeks, my phone started ringing with opportunities to be a lawyer in a different way. Like a client that I had worked at my old law firm said, hey, I know you left, but like I still need help on this case if you want to come and do some work for me. And then a filmmaker friend of mine said, hey, can you do this? I want to option this book. Can you do this deal? So I kind of just started practicing law as a solo practitioner, not because that was what I desired to do or that was my plan, but that's what showed up. Mm-hmm. And so for a number of years, after leaving big corporate law firm life where I could count on that check, that salary check coming every 2 weeks, I just started practicing on my own. And I was alone for a while, and then I had partners for a short period of time, and then I was alone again, and then I had one partner. So it had all these different iterations, so that by the time I was ready to change my relationship with food and the trajectory of my life, I was working as a lawyer with a partner, but my heart wasn't in it. Mm-hmm. And when as I'm sure you know, when your heart's not in something and you're doing it in an entrepreneurial way, it's probably not going to work out, right? So it wasn't like I was making a lot of money. I was becoming more and more removed from that career path. And although I was still technically practicing law and doing it, the money started to be less and less and less because I got interested in other things. And so I didn't actually completely walk away from being a lawyer until the day Finding Ultra came out. That's when I let my bar dues lapse and all of that. But in truth, I was kind of sliding slowly out of it all the time. Yeah. And that was frightening in its own regard because I had no prospect for how I was going to earn a living or what that would look like. When I wrote Finding Ultra, I got an advance, but that it wasn't enough to support a family of 6, and we have a big overhead and all of that. So it was great, but it wasn't going to be a sustainable career path going forward. And there was no template. There was no like, oh, well, you should do it like this person or that person. There was no model for taking these ideas that I care so much about this passion for ultra endurance and plant-based nutrition and my ability to write and communicate. Like, how do you translate that into a career that's going to be able to provide for a family? And I just had to figure it out slowly. And there were a lot of lean times. Like, we almost lost the house. We had cars repossessed. Like, it was not easy. It was very much a warrior's path. And I was tested beyond anything I've ever been challenged by in my entire life. Many times thinking, I should just go get a job at a law firm. Like, I can't keep doing this. We have no money. I don't know how this is going to work. And it was Julie who said, the solution is by moving forward with what you're doing. It's not to move backwards and be a lawyer. It's to trust and have faith that what you're building will eventually mature into something that can provide for us. Money comes and money goes, but being true to yourself, being fully integrated, this path towards self-actualization and your ability to communicate the principles and the lessons and the tenets of that is what you need to be doing. And if you trust and continue to work hard, somehow we're going to figure this out. And if we have to lose the house, we lose the house. That's fine. We're together, we're in love, but you have to continue to walk forward with fidelity to this path. And it was very difficult.
During the time that you were going through these ups and downs and, getting close to losing the house, what kept you going? What did you have in place at the time? Because you said you didn't have a plan. You had an idea of what you wanted to do.
So what kept me going really was that the response to Finding Ultra and some of the other things that I was doing, whether it was a talk or a blog post, was connecting with people. Mm-hmm. I first became aware of that prior to Finding Ultra when CNN did a story on me. And they asked me to write a blog post for CNN.com about my story, which I did and didn't think too much of. And that post was so popular that they moved it to the homepage of CNN, CNN.com, and it was like the most viewed or read or emailed story for like 48 hours straight. There was something about it that connected with people, and I ended up getting just an influx of emails. I think I got like 400 emails in a couple days of people sharing with me the intimate details of their own struggles, their own journey, like things that like they hadn't told anyone. Mm-hmm. They were confiding in me because they related to not necessarily the facts of my experience, but the emotions of my experience. And it was so moving and meaningful to me because I was just doing this for myself. Like, I just wanted to feel better. I wanted to figure out what my path in life was. It never occurred to me that this would be a career path because this took place before Finding Ultra and all that kind of stuff. But I became so acutely aware that there was a thirst, a hunger, a desire for meaningful stories to help facilitate other people's transformations and their ability to like weather obstacles on their own path towards greater fulfillment and purpose and self-actualization in their lives. So that was like the spirit that propelled me, that kept me in the game. And along the way, it was like, I had to check my ego at the door. It was very humbling. And I think, Julie and I were brought to our knees in a very material way, in a spiritual way, in an emotional way. Our marriage was tested. I think the fact that we were brought to our knees, that we were so humbled, allows us to now carry ourselves and communicate with a frequency that is truly authentic. And that word authentic has been co-opted and commercialized so much that it's been bled of all of its real meaning. But the truth is, at its core, there is something to that authenticity because it was really hard to get to where we are now. But I don't think that we would be able to be doing what we're doing now had we not endured that, what Julie calls divine moment for ourselves. So along the way, it was like I would do anything that I could, to make money. If I had to, go and do a law job, or if somebody would pay me, almost nothing, or I would go and do speaking engagements for free all the time, like anything to get the message out. Maybe I'll meet somebody, maybe this will happen. Right. The opportunity to write the book came along. I realized that was a huge moment for me. And then even in the success of Finding Ultra coming out, sort of thinking, okay, it's out there, the reviews are good, people are enjoying this book, like waiting for the phone to ring. Because part of the message of Finding Ultra and what I've experienced in my own life is that if your heart is true and you trudge this road with faith and determination and hard work and a sense of purity in your purpose, that the universe will conspire to support you. I've experienced that in my life. I've seen it manifest in many other people's lives. And so here I was with fullness of heart going, okay, universe, I'm ready for you to conspire to support me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't coming. And I had this kind of moment of thinking, maybe I'm just full of shit. Maybe everything I wrote in this book is bullshit, because like we were suffering, and ultimately, we got an opportunity to go and work with somebody in Hawaii, and we moved our family and lived there on Kauai for 3 months on an organic farm. And this guy paid us to do a number of things, and it was like, thank God, and that's where I started the podcast. And I had no idea that the podcast would become what it has become, but it was sort of just attuning your attention to the universe, trying to pay attention to what is showing up and being grateful for that, walking forward with gratitude. And ultimately, the universe did conspire to support us. It didn't happen on the time frame that I would have liked, and it didn't show up in the manner that I imagined, but that edict has proven true again in my life.
Yeah. So would you say that doubt was the ultimate test of faith during that time? Like, did you face a lot of...
I faced a lot of doubt. Doubt was a recurring theme in my journey. And I think that that's okay. To doubt is to be human. If you're not doubting yourself along the way, perhaps you're not extending yourself far enough. Perhaps you're not pushing yourself far enough. Because when you extend yourself and you're out of your comfort zone and the path forward is unclear and the terrain is not well worn, it can be confusing and destabilizing, and that's what creates doubt. When I look back on my life, it all looks like it lined up perfectly. Like, of course I'm here because I did all these things and it all makes sense. But when you're in the midst of it, I just did a podcast with the free solo climber Alex Honnold. He's the guy who scaled El Capitan without any ropes. Like, he's unbelievable. And he said something like, I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but he said something like, when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the middle of like trying to find your path, you don't always know that you're on a path, right? You don't, if you don't know what the next step is because there's no example and you're trying to figure it out on your own, then of course you're going to have moments of doubt. You're going to be tested, right? But I think if you're not being tested, like I said, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. To be tested means that doubt will be provoked, and it's not about avoiding doubt or avoiding fear. It's how you respond to those things when those things crop up. Do you move forward with conviction and purpose, or do you cower in fear and retreat, right? And there were many moments where I thought, it's time to retreat. I can't go any further. I can't do this anymore. Maybe if I was by myself living in a hut, I could do it. But there's other people in my life. I have 4 kids. I have responsibilities. Right. And as a head of a household, it can be very emasculating to have this vision for your life, this sense of purpose. And when it's not coming together and it's not working out, and other people are being, are part of this grand play, and you feel like you're not doing your job as a husband and as a father, it's a terrifying thing, and I've definitely endured that. And I think without my wife, who supported me the entire time and kept telling me, keep moving forward, I probably would have retreated, because I think most partners would say, enough of this nonsense. Like, you need to go make some cash, go get a job. What are you doing? You're acting like a crazy person. And I could tell you there were a lot of naysayers. A lot of people thought Julie and I were crazy. A lot of people said, either to our faces or behind our backs, like, what are they doing? Like, I don't understand. He's so talented. He's so smart. He has all these skills. Why is he wasting it doing this kind of thing? And that plays on your psyche, if you allow it to. So developing the awareness and the conviction and the faith was really the work. And so for me, it's an inside job. It's about your relationship with yourself and how committed can you be to this vision that you have for your life.
Let's talk about going into becoming Ultraman and the Ironman challenge and how you got into that. Was that a way for you to cope with all this uncertainty, or was that a catalyst for you to become who you are today?
I think both. When I first decided I was going to try to compete in this Ultraman race, and we should say for people that are watching, Ultraman is a double Ironman distance triathlon, the world championship version of which is held in Hawaii every November. It's a 3-day event in which you circumnavigate the entire big island of Hawaii. So the first day is a 6.2 mile swim followed by a 90 mile bike. The second day is 171 miles on the bike, and the third day is a 52 mile run, double marathon run. It's absolutely bananas, insane. It's only 35 competitors. They keep it very small. There's no media, there's no press, there's no prize money, there's no attention. It's very old school. And in many ways, what attracted me to it was that it was almost like more than an athletic event. It was like this spiritual odyssey, this adventure that will take you on this journey, at the end of which you will be transformed in some way, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I was attracted to it because I was starting to integrate into my body as a result of this change to eating plant-based, and I was feeling really good, and I wanted a physical challenge. That was so much a part of my life growing up as a kid. It was something I had loved, and I then fell out of love with it. And I realized when I started to think, like, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? It was very simple things. It was like, I love jumping in a swimming pool. I love the feeling of the sun hitting my shoulder, on a trail run at dawn. Like, those are the things that make me happy. And I just made this very conscious decision that I was going to start doing things that made me happy, because my career wasn't making me happy. And I was so tired of trying to jam this square peg into a round hole that I kind of almost gave up and said, I'm just going to be who I am. And that doesn't mean that it's a career path, but I'm still going to find a way to bring expression to this into my life. And then one thing led to another, and then this is what I wanted to explore. I felt like this was a great template to test the outer limits of my potential as an athlete, something that I had not realized as a swimmer at Stanford because of my alcoholism. So there was a bit of unfinished business. But I also saw it as a crucible for personal growth. I had these questions about what I wanted to do with myself. Who am I? What is my purpose? And there's something about the ultra endurance world. When you're doing these events, you become so depleted. You are tested so comprehensively that you're really forced to confront yourself in a very real way. All the denial strips away, and you're faced with who you really are. And that was what I sought through that experience and the experiences that followed, and that's what I got. So I feel like it gave me a North Star and an anchor and a sense of direction. Now, how that translates into like the career that I have today is very intangible and is a whole other conversation, but that's what lured me to it. And ultimately it delivered on its promise. Yeah. It was really an internal drive. I became acutely aware of how unhappy I was, and that I had a choice. And that if I wanted to be happy, that journey would have to begin with me making some difficult decisions about how I was spending my time and energy. Right. And it always reminds me of this quote by Henry David Thoreau. He said, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, and what is considered resignation is confirmed desperation." Now, he said that in whenever it was, 1880, or I don't remember exactly when Leaves of Grass came out, but I think it's very apropos to what is happening right now. I think we're in a cultural crisis, a spiritual crisis, where a lot of people, perhaps even the majority of people, are stuck in lives and careers that they find unfulfilling. We're robotically reacting to the world around us. We're responding to social and cultural expectations and pressures, and we're not living our lives purposefully or mindfully. And there's so much energy into maintaining that system, that to step outside of it and question it is to become a pariah, and also to be potentially, ostracized by family and friends. And it takes a lot of courage, and so out of desperation and pain, I was able to step outside of that and pursue a new way. And my whole message now, and kind of why I do what I do, is to help people understand that they too have a choice, that what I was able to do and accomplish is my own unique personal journey, but it is an allegory for, I think, the hero's journey that we all have locked inside ourselves to live our lives in a more mindful, purposeful way. Not everyone wants to be an ultra endurance athlete or go and do Ultraman. I get that. That's my version of this story. But I think everybody has some passion or some unique creative expression inside of them that is probably locked down deep, perhaps even all the way down into their unconscious mind, that if they could find a way to give that birth, it would gird their lives with a little bit more meaning and a little bit more direction and a little bit more happiness.
Speaking of meaning, what is your definition of success?
I think success is the freedom to have domain over your time and your energy and your resources, and to make choices that are in alignment with how you want to live your life. Success isn't a financial number. I know we live in Los Angeles. I know a lot of rich people that are very unhappy. They're prisoners of their careers and their account balances. Real success is the freedom to have choice and dominion over how you spend your time.
So, why veganism? Why plant-based?
Well, it began really with just trying to find a way to eat that agreed with me, that allowed me to feel good throughout the day without all kinds of energy lulls and without crazy food cravings. And I tried a bunch of diets, and honestly, I didn't want to become plant-based. It seemed really extreme and like some kind of crazy deprivation protocol. But when I finally had explored every other option except for going plant-based, I did it on a last resort, almost to prove that it wouldn't work. And within 7 to 10 days of eating nothing but plants, nothing with a mother, nothing with a face, just whole plant-based foods close to their natural state, it had a huge impact on how I felt. It just really revitalized me in a very rapid period of time. So my initial impetus and the reason that I got into it was really just personal. Like I was tired of being fat and tired and lazy. I didn't want to have a gut. I didn't want to look older than I was at the time. And now I've been plant-based for over 11 years. And my relationship with food continues to evolve. But I've never been more enthusiastic about being a vegan, plant-based individual and athlete, because I think that it is a lifestyle that checks a couple very important boxes for me. Mm-hmm. We talked about this sort of malaise of dissatisfaction that is kind of happening culturally right now. Well, simultaneously, despite the fact that we're an incredibly prosperous country, we've never been more sick as a society, mm-hmm. right? 1 out of every 3 people will die of a heart attack. That's insane when you think about it. By 2030, 50% of Americans are going to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. Obesity rates are through the roof. I think 70% of people are overweight or obese. Childhood obesity rates on the rise. So we have a gigantic healthcare crisis on our hands. And this epidemic of chronic lifestyle illness is not only affecting the health of ourselves, we're also exporting it across the world. And it's costing us trillions of dollars. It's bankrupting our economy. So what is going on? We need to reframe our relationship with food. And the truth of the matter is, when you go plant-based, it is the one dietary protocol that's shown to not only prevent heart disease, but actually reverse people that have heart disease. It is the antidote to type 2 diabetes. People who have type 2 diabetes, they go plant-based, they reverse their conditions. It's a way to maintain your optimal body weight. And then even perhaps the larger issue at hand is the environmental implications of the food choices that we make. animal agriculture is devastating our environment at an almost unfathomable rate. Every second, 1 to 2 football field sized parcels of land are cleared in the Amazonian rainforest to raise crops to feed cattle.
Every second.
Every second. It's insane. And I think the stat is something like 45% of all arable land right now is used for either cattle grazing or to raise crops to feed these cattle. It's an unbelievably inefficient system that is creating waste so profuse. It's creating algal blooms in our oceans. It's polluting our water table. It's creating the biggest mass species extinction event in basically the history of mankind in terms of it being man-made, man-created. The carbon emissions from animal agriculture are more profound than all of the transportation sector combined. The amount of land and water and resources that go into raising these animals for food, it doesn't make sense. It's insane. And when you go plant-based, you opt out of that system altogether. Not only are you doing that, you're also sparing all these animals' lives, these animals that are treated horribly, that are slaughtered, that are tortured, and all the like. So for me, it's a beautiful ethical way to live. And it's not like a zero impact lifestyle. Right. It's just a way to sort of walk the planet a little bit lighter, in a way that's more environmentally conscious and kind. That sort of crafts a more ethical perspective on how we treat our fellow animal friends on the planet. And it also is a very healthy way to live. So for me, it's like, do the math. Like it's an incredible lifestyle. And if I can go out and kick ass in Ultraman and do Epic 5, I did 5 Ironmans on 5 Hawaiian Islands in under a week, you can be an athlete at the highest level and still eat this way. There's no protein deficiency issues. We could talk for hours about all that kind of stuff. What about people that say
you don't get all the nutrients you need from
it? It's really a fallacy. It really is a fallacy. I've never met a doctor who said, I'm treating patients for protein deficiencies. It's just like every food that you eat has protein in it. When you talk about protein, what you're really talking about is amino acids. Right. And specifically, these 9 amino acids that are called the essential amino acids. Those are the amino acids that our bodies cannot synthesize on our own. We have to get them from our food. And people are under the misapprehension that the only way to get them is through animal products, but the animals get them through eating plants. So I'm just eating lower on the food chain. I've been doing it 11 years. I'm 51 years old right now. I go out and I push my body as hard as anybody out there. I continue to develop as an athlete, get stronger, get faster. I've never had an issue building lean muscle mass. I hit my athletic peak at like age 45. So, I stand in contradiction to this idea that you cannot be healthy or thrive or be at your athletic peak unless you're eating animal products. I think it is a great fallacy. It's a gigantic lie. It's a red herring issue. And I invite anybody who's watching this or listening to try it for 30 days. See how you feel. Don't take my word for it. Do your own experimentation on yourself.
Right. You and your wife, Julie, are starting a movement in a way, mm-hmm. right? You're pushing for the plant-based diet. You've published multiple books. And now she's starting her own line of
vegan cheese products. Yeah.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Julie came out with a book last year called This Cheese is Nuts, where she spent 2 years perfecting the art of making non-dairy, plant-based cheeses.
I'm an artist and a singer, and I just come into whatever I create in life. It doesn't really matter the medium, it's all the one creative force. And really in cheese, because I just went into this like a child, trying things and making stuff up, I knew that I would create some recipes that were pretty good, but I never imagined that I would create recipes with this level of taste, texture. It's shocking that there's no dairy in these products.
Julie has really cracked the code on this. Like, she's come up with some unbelievable recipes. You tried them,
right?
Say, they're like insane.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's like, you're like, what? How is this? How does this not have dairy in it? It's unbelievable. So that is a universal response to everybody who has tasted her cheeses, all the recipes of which you can find in her book. But there's a lot of people that are just not going to make vegan cheese at home. So she's like, I'm going to make a line. So she's embarking on the process of commercializing some of these cheese products, which I think is really exciting and great. And, you know, what's interesting about that is that, you know, after our first cookbook came out, The Plant Power Way, and we were thinking, well, what's the next book that we want to write or that Julie wants to write? There were a lot of people who said, oh, why don't you do a smoothie book or a pizza book or something like that? And she's like, no, I want to figure out how to do unbelievably amazing tasting cheese, because that is the one thing when you meet people, and I meet a lot of people who I talk to about diet and nutrition, they say, I'd love to go plant-based. I tried it, but like cheese, I can't give up cheese. Cheese is very difficult to give up. It was difficult for me to give up. I understand that. I'm sympathetic to that. So we wanted to basically address that problem and solve it for them. And I think Julie has done that.
That's
so
wonderful.
It's pretty cool.
What would you say is the key element to a successful relationship like that you and Julie have?
Well, there's a lot, but I think one of the things that has been very helpful to us is to understand that we're each sovereign individuals. I'm not here to complete her. She's not here to complete me. I'm not trying to change her, and she's not trying to change me. We have our own independent lives, and we respect that in each other. And then we can kind of come together and, like I said, do this dance. But it's the opposite of when you see Jerry Maguire and he's like, you complete me. Like, you know what I mean? Your job is to complete yourself. Mm-hmm. You need to invest in that inside job, that interior journey for yourself, so that you can be the best version of yourself for your partner.
What's on the horizon for Rich Roll? I know there's a new book coming out.
Yeah, so Finding Ultra came out in 2012, but I just spent this past year completely rewriting the book, and the new second edition, revised edition of that comes out in mid-March, March 13th. It hits bookstores. It's 100 pages longer, a new foreword, a brand new 60-page chapter that's very prescriptive. I kind of walk people through all the tools that I relied on to transform my life, in the hopes that, you know, that will be of benefit to somebody who's struggling. There's a recipe section. I put in this cleanse that I did. There was a lot of people who were interested in that. I just rewrote a lot of the prose that I wasn't happy with. So I'm really excited about that being out. And then Julie and I have a brand new cookbook called The Plant Power Way Italia that comes out April 24th. And that is inspired by these retreats that Julie and I do in the Tuscan countryside, where we take groups of people through a week-long, 7-day transformative excursion and adventure that has a lot to do with plant-based nutrition, cuisine, but also meditation, mindfulness, athleticism, you know, spiritual development, relationships, and the like. And the experience of taking these groups through these experiences in the Italian countryside has kind of inspired Julie's acumen in the kitchen. She's developed 125 new plant-based recipes that are Italian, which is pretty exciting. So we're excited about that too.
Yeah. So finally, what's a message you'd like to leave the viewers with?
The first question that you asked me, I would put that on the audience. Like, who are you? You know, who are you? Like, I want people to really think about that and wrestle with that, and not just say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an athlete, I'm a YouTuber, whatever it is. No, that's not the answer. Who are you? What makes you tick? What do you care about? What is your unique blueprint? What is your what is it that you can express and manifest in the world that is uniquely you? You know, and I think if you attune your focus to that, that will unlock doors that will provide the path forward for what you should do with your life.
Do you think it comes with experience and time, or do you think anyone can do it at any certain point of their life?
I think it's helpful if you're in pain, because pain is a great motivator. So if you're suffering and you're unhappy, I would say, rather than try to make yourself feel better, leverage that pain point to do that work and self-improve. But you don't have to be in pain. Anybody can make a choice, make a decision. It's harder to make those decisions when things are going well, right, or you've kind of set up your life with a lot of distractions. But I think if you can develop the wherewithal, the spine, the devotion, the dedication, the intention to do that kind of work, that is the path of the master.
Beautiful. Well, Rich, you're officially a legend, but
Yeah.
now a legendary legend.
Legendary.
So
Thanks,
it's a
man.
pleasure. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for
great
your
to
time.
talk to you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much.